And people are basically telling me, Scott, if you're going to start traveling, forget airfare planning, get your rental car first, because there are cities where it's $300 and $400 a day because of supply and demand. So to get back to your question, I think a lot of companies are looking at not just the lowest cost solution, but sort of with whatever their risk tolerance is, what can we afford to spend a little bit more on such that I have redundancy? I have a robust network that can respond to attacks or failures, and I can reconfigure and still be able to deliver whatever it is I'm making.
Dr. Mason, I want to talk to you a little bit quickly about just last week or the last 10 days, we saw this shortage of gasoline on the East Coast because of Colonial Pipeline and them getting hacked. You have written articles about energy management and power systems and microgrids. And I remember watching a documentary once which talked about the exposure that we have as a country of cyber attacks on the electric grid, right? So we now saw a cyber attack on gasoline supplies. How would you advise these companies who are in critical aspects of our economy and our lifestyle? How would you advise them from a supply chain point of view? Because cyber attacks is going to continue. I mean, they keep evolving the technology, but the hackers keep evolving their techniques. So that is an exposure that is going to be there. What would you advise them?
I think a lot of people in the academic space over the last 10 years have been doing a lot of work at what we'll call it resilient network designs or robust network designs, where you might be able to design a system, a network, a supply chain with minimum cost, and you get the answer X. But then they start factoring in uncertainty. They start factoring in surge capacity. They start factoring in things like, well, what if demand increases? What if parts of our network go down or they're subject to attacks or failures? What if? This kind of planning lets people build robust, resilient networks that when the inevitable happens and something goes wrong, you can respond and recover to it. I mean, right now we're dealing with a huge shortage of chips going into cars because of overseas microelectronics manufacturing, right? So these car manufacturers, think about this, rental cars now are almost impossible to get because when the pandemic hit, the rental car companies sold off their fleets. Now the demand's coming, and people are basically telling me, Scott, if you're going to start traveling, forget airfare planning, get your rental car first, because there are cities where it's $300 and $400 a day because of supply and demand. So to get back to your question, I think a lot of companies are looking at not just the lowest cost solution, but sort of with whatever their risk tolerance is, what can we afford to spend a little bit more on such that I have redundancy? I have a robust network that can respond to attacks or failures, and I can reconfigure and still be able to deliver whatever it is I'm making. Because building the lowest cost is not always the best for the long term when you realize the real world is subject to these uncertainties, these unfortunate cyber attacks, acts of nature, hurricanes and all these other things. So the work we've done with microgrids, looking at alternative sources of energy like wind and solar, a lot of work is going into figuring out what are other ways we can maintain the continuity of our business operations in the face of uncertainty. And I think it's been an academics exercise for 10 years, but IBM is huge. Their Watson tool has done a lot of work for companies looking at planning under uncertainty. And that field is just going to do nothing but continue to grow because uncertainty is constant, as an oxymoron as that is.
It's interesting to think about based on, like you talked about, tabletop exercises, what ifs, some of the different pieces about, that's why it's good to have a few people who have had or have had a little bit of experience in the military, because those guys and women are known and they have to plan for what if. What if you lose your people or lose your situation, lose your process, those kind of things. They're teaching some of our young men and women in the Navy right now how to navigate by the stars, because one of the first things that may happen in those type of situations is you lose GPS. That's going to affect a lot of people in a lot of different ways. So I agree.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just as sort of I completely agree with you. And sort of as a joke, maybe we should start teaching people how to actually call each other on the phone again, because maybe we're going to lose texting. So, you know.
Yeah. No, yeah. Well, talk about, if we lose our phone, I don't remember any of my phone numbers, so I couldn't call my loved ones. I'd be money in the phone.
That is very true.
That scares me is that with how these
Mhm.